The shuttle door opened with a hiss, and Kira Vasquez stepped onto the landing platform of the most prestigious military academy in the known galaxy. She was 24 years old, a former Marine from Earth, and she stood at only 5 feet 6 inches tall. Around her towered aliens of every shape and size imaginable. Some had 4 arms, while others had scales that gleamed like polished metal. A few floated on wings that hummed with energy, and several moved on too many legs to count. Every single one of them stopped to stare at her. Whispers spread through the crowd like fire through dry grass. She could not understand most of the alien languages, but she caught fragments in Galactic Common. Is that a human? A Deathworlder here? Surely there must be some mistake. Kira kept her face calm and walked forward with steady steps. She had survived 3 tours on the outer colonies, and she had fought pirates and smugglers, and things that had no names in human languages. A few stares from curious aliens would not break her composure. The Galactic Unified Combat Academy sat on a neutral moon called Velar 7. It had trained elite warriors from over 200 species for more than 3,000 years. The buildings rose around her like monuments to violence and discipline. Towers of dark metal reached toward the purple sky, and training grounds stretched as far as she could see. And until today, no human had ever walked these grounds as a cadet. A booming voice echoed across the landing area and silenced all conversation. All new cadets will proceed to the Grand Assembly Hall immediately. Kira followed the flow of alien bodies through massive corridors. The ceiling rose so high above her that she felt like an ant walking through a cathedral. Everything here had been built for species much larger than humans. The Grand Assembly Hall could have fit a small city inside it. Thousands of cadets filled the seats in rising tiers, and Kira found a spot near the back where she could observe everything. On the central stage stood the most impressive alien she had ever seen. Commandant Zevrith of the Calvary species rose 9 feet tall with a body like a praying mantis made of black armor. His eyes gleamed with ancient intelligence, and when he spoke his voice carried to every corner of the hall without any amplification. Welcome to the Galactic Unified Combat Academy. You have been selected from billions of candidates across 200 worlds. You represent the finest warriors your species can produce. He paused and let his gaze sweep across the assembly. Here you will learn to fight alongside species you have never met. You will train with weapons you have never seen. You will push your bodies and minds beyond any limit you thought possible. Kira listened carefully and noted everything about how he moved and spoke. This was a leader who commanded respect through presence alone. But first, you must understand our most sacred rule. The commandant continued. No personal weapons are permitted within Academy grounds. All combat training will use standardized Academy equipment only. This rule exists to create equality among species with vastly different natural abilities. A murmur ran through the crowd. Kira understood why. Many of the species around her came equipped with natural weapons. She could see venomous stingers and retractable claws and teeth that could bite through steel. How could they possibly leave those behind? Those with natural weapons will be registered, but permitted to remain as they are. Zevrith added, We cannot ask you to remove parts of your own bodies. However, you will learn to control these gifts and use them only when authorized. That made more sense. But it also meant that Kira would be one of the only cadets without any natural advantages. No claws, no venom, no armor, just soft human skin and dull human teeth. After the assembly concluded, Kira followed the directions to her assigned barracks. Sigma 12 turned out to be a large room with 4 sleeping areas designed to accommodate different body types. 3 aliens already waited inside. The first was a slender creature with 4 arms and large nervous eyes. His skin was pale blue and he stood about her height. He introduced himself as Thalvex of the Rylosi and his voice trembled slightly when he spoke. "I am here to study combat tactics and strategy. I am not much of a fighter myself, but my government insisted I attend." The second was impossible to miss. Mornak of the dragon species filled half the room with his massive reptilian body. He stood over 7 feet tall with scales the color of dried blood and muscles that rippled beneath his hide. His teeth were each as long as her fingers. He looked down at Kira with obvious contempt. So this is the famous human, the Death Worlder everyone whispers about. He let out a rumbling laugh. "Look at you. No claws, no fangs, no armor. What threat could something so soft possibly pose?" Kira met his gaze without flinching. "I guess you will find out." The third roommate made no sound at all. Selitha of the Mindari floated in the corner like a ghost made of silver mist. Her species communicated through telepathy, and when she reached out to touch Kira's mind, the sensation was like cool water flowing through her thoughts. "You are very calm for someone so far from home," Selitha observed. "Most new cadets radiate fear and uncertainty, but you feel like a still pond with something dangerous waiting beneath the surface." "I have been dangerous places before," Kira replied. "This is just another one." Vornak snorted and turned away. "Words mean nothing here, human. Only strength matters. And you have none." Kira did not argue. She simply began unpacking her few belongings and organizing her space with military precision. Later that night, as the others slept, she stood by the window and looked out at the alien stars. She thought about everyone back home who had told her this was a mistake. Humans did not belong among the elder races of the galaxy. Humans were too young and too weak and too fragile. But Kira knew something they did not. Humanity had not survived by being the strongest. They had survived by being clever and stubborn and absolutely refusing to give up. Tomorrow the real training would begin. Tomorrow she would show them what a Death Worlder could do. In another part of the Academy, Senior Instructor Morax reviewed the files of all new cadets. He was a creature of scales and calculating eyes, and he had trained warriors for over 60 years. When he reached the human file, he frowned. Her biological readings made no sense. Her adrenaline reserves were off the charts. Her muscle density was unusual for her small size. Her pain tolerance was listed as unmeasurable. He ran the scan 3 times to make sure there was no error. How could something that looked so fragile have biology so extreme? He added a note to her file in glowing red letters. "Monitor closely." Something about this human worried him, and Morax had learned long ago to trust his instincts. 3 weeks had passed since Kira arrived at the academy, and every day had been harder than the last. She woke before dawn for physical conditioning. She attended lectures on alien biology and combat tactics until her head spun. She practiced with weapons she had never seen before and learned fighting styles that had existed for thousands of years. And through it all, she endured the constant whispers and stares. Most of the other cadets had never seen a human before. They watched her like scientists watching a strange insect. Some were curious, while others were openly hostile. A few seemed almost afraid, though they tried to hide it. But today, everything would change. Today was the first live combat assessment in the Crucible Arena. The arena was a massive circular pit surrounded by rising seats filled with watching cadets and instructors. The floor was made of some material that could absorb blood and repair itself between matches. Ancient weapons hung on the walls as decorations from 1,000 different cultures. Senior Instructor Morax stood at the center calling out names. Cadets will be randomly paired for non-lethal sparring matches. Victory is achieved by submission or knockout. Killing your opponent is grounds for immediate expulsion. His cold eyes swept the crowd, and Kira felt them pause on her for just a moment. First match. Cadet Kira Vasquez of Earth versus Cadet Garth of the Varaki. A rumble of excitement went through the audience. Kira heard someone laugh, and another voice said something about placing bets on how long the human would last. She descended into the arena and got her first close look at her opponent. Gorith was a nightmare made flesh. The Viraki species had 4 arms, each ending in hands like stone mallets. His skin was covered in plates of natural bone armor that looked thick enough to stop bullets. He stood nearly 7 feet tall and probably weighed 400 pounds. Every inch of him had been designed by evolution for combat, and according to the whispers, he had never lost a match in his life. Gorith looked at Kira, and his lipless mouth twisted into something like a smile. "This is a joke, yes? They sent me a creature I could break with one hand." Kira said nothing. She simply walked to her starting position and began stretching her muscles. Instructor Morax approached her with a standard academy blade in his hands. "Cadet Vasquez, you may select your weapon. I would recommend the blade, as it offers reach advantage against a larger opponent." Kira looked at the blade and then shook her head. Morax frowned. "Are you certain, Cadet? The Viraki are formidable opponents. You will need every advantage." "I appreciate the offer, sir," Kira replied calmly. "But humans do not require weapons." A stunned silence fell over the arena. Then laughter erupted from dozens of throats. Gorith laughed loudest of all. "The soft creature wishes to die with honor. Very well, I will try to make it quick." Kira walked to the center of the arena with empty hands. Her heart was beating faster now, but her breathing stayed slow and controlled. She had done this 100 times in training and in real combat. She had fought enemies bigger than Gorith with nothing but her bare hands. The starting signal sounded and Gorith charged. He was fast, faster than something that big should be. His 4 fists came swinging at her like wrecking balls aimed at every part of her body. But Kira did not try to block. Blocking was for people who could match their opponent's strength. Instead, she moved. She slipped under the first punch and pivoted away from the second. She ducked the third and let the fourth pass so close she could feel the wind on her face. Every movement was small and precise. She never wasted energy on anything unnecessary. Gorith roared in frustration and attacked again. And again. And again. Each time Kira simply was not there when his fists arrived. "Stand still and fight." He bellowed. "Make me." She replied. She was reading him now. Every fighter had patterns and Gorith was no exception. He always led with his upper right arm. He always dropped his lower left guard when he lunged. His weight shifted a certain way before each attack. She had spent weeks studying Viraki biology in her xenobiology courses. She knew exactly where his nerve clusters were located. She knew which joints were weakest. She knew that despite all that armor, there were gaps between the plates where soft tissue lay exposed. Gorith lunged again, and this time Kira did not retreat. She stepped inside his reach and drove her elbow into the nerve cluster under his upper right arm. The limb went numb and dropped to his side. Before he could react, she was behind him. Her legs wrapped around his torso, and her arms snaked around his thick neck. It was called a rear naked choke, a technique humans have perfected over thousands of years of fighting each other. It did not require strength. It required leverage and knowledge of blood flow. Her forearm pressed against the major blood vessels in his neck, not the windpipe. She was not trying to suffocate him. She was cutting off blood to his brain. Gorith thrashed and roared. He spun and slammed her against the arena wall. The impact drove the air from her lungs, but she did not let go. 5 seconds passed. His movements became sluggish. 8 seconds. He stumbled forward. 11 seconds. The undefeated champion of the Viraki collapsed unconscious to the arena floor. Kira released him and stood up slowly. Her body ached, and she knew she would have bruises tomorrow. But she was standing, and he was not. The arena was completely silent. Thousands of aliens stared at her with expressions she could not read. Then Instructor Morak stepped forward and raised his voice. Winner by submission, Cadet Kira Vasquez. The silence continued. No one seemed to know how to react. Kira walked back to the waiting area where her roommates stood frozen in shock. Even Vornak, the mighty Draken, looked at her with something new in his eyes. You could have killed him, Vornak said quietly. At any moment you could have crushed his throat or broken his neck. But you measured your force exactly. You put him down without permanent damage. Kira shrugged. That was the point. Killing him would have been easy. Controlling the fight so no one died was the hard part. Thalvex, the nervous Relosi, was trembling. I have never seen anything like that. You had no weapon, no natural advantages. You just used his own size against him. Silitha, the telepath, drifted closer, and her mental voice was filled with something like awe. I felt your mind during the fight. There was no fear, no anger, no hesitation. Just pure calculation. Like a predator who had already decided its prey would fall. You were simply choosing how. Kira wiped sweat from her forehead. That is how humans fight. We are not the strongest or the fastest, but we can think while we move. We can adapt in real time. And we have been fighting things bigger than us since before we discovered fire. Word of her victory spread through the academy like wildfire. By dinner time, every cadet knew the story of the human who defeated a Varaki with her bare hands. But far away in a private chamber, someone else watched the recording of her fight. Admiral Lessex of the Dominion Hegemony leaned back in his chair and let out a long, slow breath. His species had dismissed humans as irrelevant primitives from a dangerous little planet. They had assumed the Deathworlders would never amount to anything significant. Looking at this footage, he realized they had made a terrible mistake. So Earth's monsters have finally come to play, he whispered to himself. This changes everything. He began composing a message to his contacts in the shadows. The human would need to be watched very carefully, or perhaps dealt with permanently. The jungle moon of Kethros 4 was a nightmare of green shadows and screaming wildlife. Kira stood at the starting line with 200 other cadets looking out at a wall of alien vegetation that seemed to swallow all light. Strange creatures howled in the distance, and the air was so thick with humidity that every breath felt like drinking water. This was the endurance trial, the most feared test in the entire academy. Commandant Zevra stood before them on a floating platform, and his voice carried across the assembled cadets. The rules are simple. You must traverse 200 kilometers of hostile terrain. There will be no supplies provided. There will be no rescue shuttles. You will survive on your own, or you will tap out and accept failure. He gestured toward the jungle with one long armored limb. The last cadet moving forward wins. Those who give up will activate their emergency beacons and be collected. Those who become incapacitated will be retrieved by our medical drones, but their academy careers may not survive the shame. Kira listened carefully and studied the faces around her. Most of the alien cadets looked confident. They had natural advantages she could not match. Some could fly. Some could see in complete darkness. Some had bodies adapted to extreme environments far worse than this. Begin, the commandant shouted. The cadets exploded forward like missiles. A group of Sylvathi spread their wings and took to the air immediately. 3 Varaki crashed through the undergrowth like living tanks. A pack of Fenari hunters bounded ahead on their 6 legs, moving faster than any ground vehicle. Within minutes, Kira found herself nearly alone at the back of the pack. She did not try to run. She did not try to match their speed. Instead, she settled into a steady jogging pace that her body could maintain for hours. One of the few cadets still near her was Thalvex. The Rylosi was struggling to move through the dense vegetation with his 4 slender arms. "Kira, wait," he called out. "Should we not try to catch the others?" "No," she replied without breaking her rhythm. "Let them run. We will see who is still moving in 50 kilometers. Thalvex looked confused, but he fell into step beside her. Or rather, he fell into his own stumbling pace while she stayed steady. The first 10 kilometers were brutal. The jungle fought them at every step. Vines grabbed at their legs. Insects swarmed around their heads. The ground was soft mud that sucked at their feet. But Kira kept moving. At kilometer 30, she passed the first collapsed cadets. 3 Fenari hunters lay on the ground, panting and gasping. Their incredible speed had burned through their energy reserves in less than an hour. At kilometer 50, she found the Sylvathi. The flying species had landed in exhaustion and now sat in miserable clusters. Their wings were not designed for sustained flight, and they had used everything they had in that first sprint. "How are you still moving?" one of them demanded as Kira jogged past. "I never stopped," she answered simply. Thalvex was falling behind now. His species was not built for physical endurance, and every step seemed to cost him more than the last. At kilometer 80, the temperature began to rise. The jungle gave way to open rocky terrain where the alien sun beat down without mercy. Kira felt sweat pouring down her body, but she had trained in deserts hotter than this. She found Vornok lying on his back beside a dried stream bed. The mighty Draken, who had mocked her on the first day, now lay gasping like a beached fish. "Water!" he croaked when he saw her. "Need water." His reptilian body was overheating. His species had evolved on a cooler world, and they had no sweat glands to regulate their temperature. Kira paused and looked at him. She remembered his contempt and his cruel laughter. She could walk away and leave him to tap out in shame. But that was not who she was. She reached into her improvised pack and pulled out a container of water she had collected from the jungle. She poured it over his head and watched his eyes refocus. "Thank you," he whispered. "Keep moving if you can." She told him, "The medical drones will find you if you cannot." Then she was moving again. Always moving. At kilometer 100, she caught up with Silitha. The telepathic Mindari floated weakly just above the ground. Her species used mental energy for locomotion, and she had nearly exhausted herself. "I cannot continue," Silitha admitted. "My mind is empty. There is nothing left." "Rest then," Kira said. "You made it further than most. There is no shame in that." She left Silitha behind and pressed on. At kilometer 112, she found Thalvex collapsed in the shade of a rock formation. His blue skin had turned pale, and his breathing was shallow and weak. Dehydration had nearly killed him. This time, Kira stopped completely. She built a simple shelter to protect him from the sun. She found a depression in the rocks that held stagnant water and filtered it through her shirt. She dripped water into his mouth drop by drop until his eyes opened. "Why?" he asked weakly. "You are sacrificing your ranking for me. Why would you do that?" Kira sat back and looked at the horizon. She could see other cadets in the distance, some moving and some fallen. Humans do not leave people behind. She answered, "That is our way. We take care of each other even when it costs us. Even when it makes no logical sense." She waited until Thalvex could stand again. Then she made a decision that shocked him completely. She lifted him onto her back and began walking. "What are you doing?" he protested. "I am too heavy. You will destroy yourself. You weigh less than my combat pack back home," she replied. "Now hold on and try not to wiggle." She carried him for 30 kilometers. The sun rose and fell. The terrain changed from rocks to sand to thick forest. Her muscles screamed and her joints ached and every breath burned in her lungs. But she never stopped. High above in orbit, Instructor Morax watched the tracking data with growing disbelief. Most of the cadets had tapped out before the 100-kilometer mark. The supposedly superior species, with all their natural advantages, had collapsed one by one. But the human was still moving, and she was carrying another cadet on her back. Impossible, he whispered. He pulled up the file on Earth and searched for anything that could explain what he was seeing. What he found made his blood run cold. Persistence, predation. The words glowed on his screen. Ancient humans had hunted by chasing prey until it died of exhaustion. They could not run as fast as their prey, but they could run longer. They would track an animal for hours and then days until it simply collapsed and gave up. Humans had not evolved to be the fastest or the strongest. They had evolved to never stop. They were endurance hunters, the most terrifying predators in the galaxy. Morax watched the human female carry her companion past the 180-kilometer mark. Cadets who had mocked her speed at the start now lay scattered behind her like fallen leaves. Kira crossed the finish line in third place. 2 flying species had managed to complete the trial ahead of her by resting in stages and flying in bursts. But she was the only cadet who finished while carrying another student. The commandant himself was waiting at the finish line. His ancient eyes studied her with new respect. "Cadet Vasquez," he said, "you could have placed first if you had abandoned your companion. Why did you not?" Kira set Thalvex down gently and straightened her aching back. "Winning means nothing if you lose yourself to get there," she answered. "Humans have a saying. The strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. We are nothing without each other." The commandant was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Perhaps there is more to your species than I understood. Perhaps much more." That night, Thalvex sat beside Kira in the medical bay while healers tended to her battered body. "I will never forget what you did," he said quietly. "You carried me when you had every reason to leave me behind. I owe you my life and my honor." Kira smiled despite her exhaustion. "You owe me nothing. That is what friends do." "Friends?" The word echoed in Thalvex's mind. He had never had a friend before, but now he understood what the word truly meant. The orbital station glittered like a jewel against the stars. Inside its grand ballroom, the most powerful beings in the galaxy had gathered for the diplomatic gala. Kira stood at attention in her formal academy uniform and tried not to stare at the impossible wealth surrounding her. Crystal chandeliers floated overhead without any visible support. The walls displayed living art that shifted and changed with the mood of the room. Servers glided between guests, carrying foods from 100 different worlds. She and her fellow cadets had been assigned as honor guards for the evening. It was mostly ceremonial, but it was also a chance to be seen by important people who might offer positions after graduation. Thalvex stood beside her looking extremely uncomfortable. "I hate formal events," he whispered. "Everyone expects you to make conversation, and I never know what to say. Just smile and nod," Kira advised. "Works for me every time." Vornak was on the other side of the room serving as an impressive decoration. His massive Dracon frame drew admiring glances from dignitaries who had never seen his species up close. He had changed since the endurance trial. The contempt in his eyes had been replaced by something like grudging respect. Silitha floated near the entrance, using her telepathic abilities to sense the emotions of arriving guests. She would alert security if anyone seemed hostile or suspicious. Everything seemed peaceful. Just another boring diplomatic function where old politicians told old stories and made old deals. But Kira felt something wrong. She could not explain it. There was nothing specific she could point to. just a feeling in her gut that something bad was coming. Humans called it instinct, and she had learned long ago to trust it. She scanned the crowd looking for anything out of place. The commandant stood near the center of the room speaking with a delegation of insectoid ambassadors. Near the windows, a group of Dominion hegemony officers clustered together, and one of them kept glancing at his communicator. That one, Admiral Wessex. Kira recognized him from her intelligence briefings. He was powerful and connected and rumored to have ambitions that went far beyond his current rank. Why did he keep checking his device? What was he waiting for? The answer came without warning. Every light in the ballroom went dark at once. The floating chandeliers fell silent and crashed to the floor. Screams erupted from the crowd as dignitaries stumbled in the sudden blackness. Kira's eyes adjusted faster than most. Humans had evolved as both predator and prey, and they could function in low light better than species who relied on bright environments. But even with adjusted eyes, she could barely see. And then she heard something that chilled her blood. 3 soft footsteps that should have been silent. A slight displacement of air where nothing visible moved. The faint scent of something chemical and alien. The Wraithkin had arrived. She knew them from her studies. The Wraithkin were assassins who could bend light around their bodies and become completely invisible. They were the most feared killers in the galaxy, and they never failed to eliminate their targets. 3 of them now moved through the darkness toward the commandant. Contact! Kira shouted. Assassins near the commandant. 3 Wraithkin. But no one else could see them. No one else could detect them. The alien dignitaries stumbled around in blind panic while death moved among them unseen. Kira did not hesitate. She launched herself toward where she had sensed the assassins. How can you see us? A voice hissed from the darkness. We are invisible. I cannot see you. Kira replied. But I can hear you breathe. I can feel the air move when you pass. I can smell the chemicals in your skin. She struck out with her fist and connected with something solid. The Wraith King grunted in pain and stumbled backward. Impossible, another voice said from her left. Kira spun and blocked a blade that she could not see. The vibro edge cut her arm, but she grabbed the wrist behind it and twisted. Bones cracked, and the weapon clattered to the floor. The third assassin tried to circle behind her. She heard his footsteps and felt a subtle change in air pressure. She grabbed a dinner plate from a nearby table and threw it like a discus. The crack of ceramic against skull was immensely satisfying. Now she was fighting 2 wounded Wraithkin in complete darkness. Her arm was bleeding and her heart was pounding, but her mind remained crystal clear. The aliens could turn invisible, but they could not turn intangible. They still had mass, and they still displaced air, and they still made sounds no matter how quiet they tried to be. Humans had evolved to detect predators in the dark. Their ancient ancestors had survived by hearing the soft pad of a tiger's foot, by smelling the musk of a hidden lion, by feeling the vibration of something large moving nearby. Those instincts had never left. They were still there, buried deep in the human brain, waiting to be awakened. Kira let those instincts take over. She stopped trying to see and started feeling instead. Her ears tracked every tiny sound. Her skin registered every shift in the air. Her nose caught the scent of alien blood and fear. She moved through the darkness like a ghost herself. Her fists and feet found targets she could not see. She blocked attacks that came from nowhere and struck back at enemies who thought themselves hidden. One Wraithkin fell with a crushed windpipe. Another collapsed when she drove her knee into his nerve cluster. The third tried to flee, but Kira caught him before he could reach the commandant. She tackled him to the ground and wrapped her hands around his throat. At that exact moment, the lights came back on. Every dignitary in the room froze at what they saw. A small human female covered in blue blood straddled an invisible assassin who was flickering into view. Her hands were locked around his neck and her eyes burned with something primal and terrifying. She was smiling. "Do not move," she commanded. "You are under arrest for attempted murder of a galactic official." Security forces finally arrived and took the assassin into custody. Medical teams rushed to help the wounded, including Kira herself. The commandant approached her as healers bandaged her arm. His ancient eyes studied her with an expression she could not read. "You fought 3 Wraithkin assassins in complete darkness," he said slowly. "You detected them when no one else could. How?" Kira shrugged and winced as the movement pulled at her wound. "Humans evolved on a dangerous world. We were never the apex predators. There was always something bigger and faster hunting us in the dark. We learned to sense threats we could not see or we died." The captured assassin was being questioned nearby. His handlers had tried to resist, but one look at Kira standing there dripping with blood had convinced them to cooperate. "She smiled at me," the assassin kept saying. "In the darkness where she could not possibly see me, she smiled like she knew exactly where I was. What are these humans? What kind of monsters does that planet produce?" Silitha drifted closer, and her telepathic voice was soft with wonder. I felt her mind during the fight. She told the commandant. There was no panic, no confusion. She became something ancient, something that hunted in the darkness before her species had language or fire. She became a predator from the dawn of her world. Admiral Desix tried to slip away during the confusion, but Vornek had been watching him all night. The massive Draken blocked his path with arms folded across his chest. "Going somewhere, Admiral?" Within hours, the investigation revealed everything. Desix had hired the Wraithkin to kill the commandant and frame the human. He wanted to prove that Deathworlders were too dangerous to trust. He wanted to start a movement to isolate Earth from the galactic community. Now he sat in chains while his entire conspiracy unraveled. Before they took him away, he looked at Kira one last time. "You think you have won," he spat. "But the Dominion will not forget this humiliation. Earth must be contained. If one human is this dangerous, imagine what billions could do." Kira met his gaze without flinching. "I hope you never have to find out," she replied. "Because humans protect each other. And when we fight together, there is nothing in this galaxy that can stop us." The Admiral was dragged away, still shouting threats and warnings. But before Kira could relax, Commandant Zevrith placed a hand on her shoulder. "You saved my life tonight, Cadet Vasquez. You saved the lives of everyone in this room. There will be a formal commendation. But more importantly, I want you to know something." He leaned closer, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "I was wrong about your species. We all were. You are not primitive. You are not weak. You are something new. Something this old galaxy has never seen before. And I think perhaps that is exactly what we needed." Kira felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with her injuries. "Thank you, sir. That means more than any medal ever could." 20 weeks had passed since Kira first stepped off that shuttle onto Academy grounds. 20 weeks of blood and sweat and pain. 20 weeks of proving herself against beings who should have crushed her without effort. Now she stood in the grand amphitheater wearing her dress uniform and waiting for her name to be called. The graduation ceremony was the most important day in any cadet's life. Thousands of species filled the rising seats and watched as the newest warriors of the galaxy received their commissions. Flags from 200 worlds hung from the ceiling, and representatives from every major power watched with calculating eyes. Kira was not alone. Her roommates stood beside her in their own formal attire. Thalvex had transformed over the past 20 weeks. The nervous scholar who trembled at loud noises had become a confident tactician. His instructor said he had a gift for strategy that came along once in a generation. "I would not be here without you," he whispered to Kira. You saved my life in the endurance trial. But more than that, you taught me that courage is not about having no fear. It is about moving forward despite the fear. Vornak stood like a mountain of muscle and scales, but the arrogance was gone from his eyes. In its place was something more valuable. Respect. I mocked you on the first day. He rumbled. I called you soft and weak. I was a fool. You are the strongest warrior I have ever known. Not because of your muscles, but because of your heart. Salitha floated beside them, and her telepathic presence wrapped around the group like a warm embrace. I have touched minds across 100 worlds. She said, I have felt the thoughts of saints and monsters, but I have never felt anything quite like a human mind. You burn so brightly. Your lives are so short, but you fill them with such passion and love and determination. It is beautiful and terrifying all at once. Kira felt tears threatening to form in her eyes. She blinked them away quickly. Marines did not cry at graduation ceremonies. But these were not just her roommates anymore. They were her pack, her family. The bonds they had formed over 20 weeks of shared struggle were stronger than any blood relation. Commandant Zevrith took the stage, and the crowd fell silent. His massive form commanded attention without any effort. When he spoke, his voice reached every corner of the amphitheater. Today, we celebrate the graduation of our finest cadets. They have proven themselves in combat and in endurance and in wisdom. They will go forth to serve the galaxy with honor and distinction. He paused, and his ancient eyes swept across the assembled graduates. But before we begin the formal ceremony, I have a special commendation to deliver. Cadet Kira Vasquez, please come forward. Kira felt her heart skip as she walked toward the stage. Every eye in the galaxy seemed focused on her. She climbed the steps and stood before the commandant. When this human arrived 20 weeks ago, I confess I shared the prejudice of many in this room. Zevrith announced. Humans seemed fragile, unimpressive. Their world had only been spacefaring for 3 centuries. What could such a young species possibly teach the elder races? He turned to face the crowd directly. I have since learned that this assessment was dangerously incomplete. A murmur ran through the audience. The commandant had never spoken like this before. Humans do not have natural armor. He continued. So they learn to move where strikes cannot land. They flow like water around obstacles that would stop any other species. Kira thought of her fight against Garth, the way she had slipped through his attacks without ever trying to block them. Humans do not have claws or fangs, so they learn to turn anything into a weapon. A broken plate, a piece of wire. They're on bare hands. Nothing is harmless when a human decides it is dangerous. She remembered fighting the Wraithkin with nothing but a dinner plate and her fists. Humans do not have venom or poison, so they learn patience. The most lethal toxin of all. They will wait days or weeks or years for the right moment to strike. They never forget, and they never give up. The endurance trial flashed through her mind. Walking when others collapsed. Carrying Thalvex on her back. Never stopping. And most remarkably, the commandant raised his voice. Humans do not have telepathy or hive bonds or biological connections to their packmates. So they invented something more powerful. They invented loyalty earned through choice. He gestured toward Thalvex. This human carried a stranger 30 kilometers through hostile terrain. Not because biology demanded it. Not because instinct compelled her. Because she decided he was worth saving. She chose to make him part of her pack. Thalvex wiped tears from his large eyes. Vornak placed a massive hand on his shoulder. That is what makes humans truly dangerous. Zevrith declared. Not their strength or speed or endurance, but their ability to form bonds that transcend species and biology. Their capacity to fight not just for themselves, but for anyone they choose to love. He turned back to Kira, Cadet Vasquez, for exceptional valor in defense of galactic officials, for demonstrating the highest ideals of the Academy, for teaching us all what it truly means to be a warrior. I award you the Star of Unity, the highest honor this Academy can bestow. He pinned a gleaming medal to her chest. The crowd erupted in applause. When the noise finally died down, the Commandant spoke again. The human has requested permission to address the assembly. Given her accomplishments, I saw no reason to refuse. Cadet Vasquez, the floor is yours. Kira stepped to the podium and looked out at the sea of alien faces. Beings from every corner of the galaxy waited to hear what she would say. She took a deep breath and began. Since I arrived here, you have all asked me the same question in different ways. What makes humans dangerous? What is it about my species that earned us the name Death Worlders? She paused and let the silence stretch. Some of you thought it was our strength, but there are many species stronger than us. Some thought it was our endurance, but we can be outlasted. Some thought it was our adaptability, but we have our limits like everyone else. Her eyes found her roommates in the crowd. The truth is simpler and more terrifying. What makes humans dangerous is that we choose who we fight for. We do not follow instinct or programming. We do not serve hive minds or biological imperatives. We look at the beings around us and we decide, that one is my friend. That one is my family. That one is worth dying for. Her voice grew stronger. Back on Earth we have a saying, a human alone is a survivor. Humans together are a force of nature. We conquered our world not by being the best at anything, but by working together, by choosing to trust each other, by building bonds that made us more than the sum of our parts. She straightened her spine and lifted her chin. So here is my message to the galaxy. You do not need to fear humanity. We have no desire to conquer or dominate. We want partners and friends and allies. We want to stand beside you, not above you. Her eyes hardened. But I will also offer you a warning. Never give us a reason to stand united against you. Because when humans fight together for something we believe in, there is no force in this galaxy that can stop us. We will cross any distance, endure any hardship, pay any price, and we will never ever give up. The amphitheater was completely silent. Then Vornik stood and slammed his fist against his chest in the Draken salute. Thalvex rose beside him. Silitha floated upward. One by one the graduates joined them. Species that had never agreed on anything united in a single gesture of respect. The applause that followed shook the walls. After the ceremony, Kira found a quiet balcony overlooking the stars. Her medal felt heavy on her chest, but her heart felt light. Footsteps approached, and she turned to find Instructor Morax standing behind her, the alien who had flagged her file on the first day. Cadet Vasquez, he said formally, I wanted to speak with you before you depart. Of course, sir. What can I do for you? He pulled out a datapad and showed her a screen. It was her academy file. On your first day, I added a note to your records. It said, monitor closely. I was suspicious of you, uncertain what you were capable of. Kira nodded. I remember seeing that in my file. I have removed that note, Morax said, and I have replaced it with something more appropriate. He turned the screen so she could read the new entry. 2 words glowed in bright letters. Do not engage. Kira laughed. A real genuine laugh that came from deep in her belly. Thank you, sir. I will take that as a compliment. Morax's face twisted into something that might have been a smile. It is the highest compliment I know how to give. You have changed my understanding of what is possible. You have changed the understanding of everyone who watched you. The galaxy will never look at humans the same way again. He turned to leave but paused at the doorway. One more thing, Cadet. I have served this academy for 60 years. I have trained warriors from every species in the known galaxy. And you are without question the most terrifying student I have ever taught." Kira grinned. Humans aim to impress. Morak shook his head and walked away, still muttering to himself. Kira turned back to the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth spun through the void. Her homeworld! A planet of gravity that crushed and weather that killed and predators that hunted. A death world by any reasonable standard. But it had produced her. It had produced humanity. A species of dreamers and fighters and survivors who refused to accept the impossible. The galaxy did not know what was coming. But it would learn. One human at a time.